Hi, my name is Terrace Travers, and I am part of Group 2. I'm doing my summary on Chapter 9 out of Radical Behaviorism for ABA Practitioners by James M. Johnston. Chapter 9 was about a social life. So to start the chapter off, it was an intro about a kid named Bobby. He's 13 years old. He has a mild intellectual disability. He lives with his family. He attends a public school special education program. The presenting problem was he resisted compliance with requests by others, and he has a history of aggression and destruction of property behaviors when not getting what he wants. After Jordan observed Bobby behaviors, he concluded that the family has created a family culture where aggressive social interactions are practiced. So let's get into the chapter, which focuses on culture. So, culture-free contingencies. Johnston begins by stating all humans participate in contingencies that are the result of our biology and its interface with the physical environments. You can find that on page 164. The contingencies cannot be controlled. This contingency cannot be controlled. For most humans, our routine comes from non-social contingencies, such as our senses. So the book provides examples such as not being able to see well in the dark, less active at night compared to during the day, our smell not being as impressive compared to other species, and then being comfortable with certain range of temperatures. So we can't handle when it's really, really cold or extremely hot. Moving on to and the influence of culture, which is the next subtopic. Culture is everything that affects us that involves other people. It is not possible to avoid being influenced by our culture. They discuss verbal repertoire, which is the most notable result of social environment. So basically what we learn what is acceptable and what is not. So when to avoid behaviors unacceptable for certain social circumstances. We are so influenced by social experiences that we mentally process them as our own. Natural selection. So according to B.F. Skinner, there are three ways that natural selection underline behaviors. The first is the contingencies of survival responsible for natural selection of species. The second is the contingencies of reinforcement responsible for the repertoires acquired by its members. The third, which is what this book in this chapter actually focuses on, is special contingencies maintained by and involve social environment. And you can find these in Johnston's book on page 166. So selection by cultural practices. They occur at a much slower pace, which is why it's challenging to study. Some elements of natural selection. So there's variation. In the book they discuss, wearing a hat, and to discuss the individual of variation. I changed it up a very little bit so that I could understand it a little bit more. But basically, I wear a hat to church. I wear a different hat to an outside event when it's cold outside. And then I wear a different hat to the mall on a bad hair day. Excuse me. So in that situation, it's still a hat, but it's a different hat for different circumstances in a different environment. So when you look at the cultural part of variation, the book explains wearing a fedora-style hat in public, no matter the time of year, in the 1920s to 1960s. Because this was something that men always wore, it is considered culturally and practiced for comfort and social approval. Next, you have transmission and replication. This is typically across generations and over time. So many kids will mimic behaviors of older siblings or parents that comes from direct instruction or imitation, and it's more likely if the behavior is reinforced. Selection is the third element. This is following rules, you're gaining reinforcement and not receiving consequences. So you're likely to abide by the law to prevent legal actions taken against you. Then we have social reinforcement. So proximate is the immediate reinforcer, and that's socially. So being praised by my boyfriend for going to the gym today. Then you have the ultimate reinforcement, which is the long-term reinforcer. So the health and reproductive fitness. For example, I'll be healthy and more in shape because of going to the gym. So where can this lead? A role for behavior science. Behavior of individual is raw material of cultural practices. Behavior analysis study cultural practices through individual behavior, and cultural practices are always changing. Changing cultural practices. So it's likely to happen over time. For example, and they talked about this in the chapter as well. Smoking acceptable widespread, such as in restaurants and other locations. If you notice, currently most restaurants are non-smoking environments. So that is something that changed. It took a while, but it changed over time. So then you have laws leading to changes in cultural practice, and then practices viewed as rights and values results in conflict. This is because they believe they have free will to choose whatever they want to do. Culture engineering. So it's difficult due to people determining how to make a change. And then you have multiple cultural groups. Cultures are not always defined by geographical boundaries. So one person can be a part of many different culture groups. So think about the families, friends, work, holidays that you may celebrate just because of the people that you hang with at work. Those can all be considered cultures. One that I didn't think about before reviewing this chapter would be my group of friends who always go to the gym and work out. So the questions that I propose from this chapter: what is a culture group that you are a part of that you may not have thought of as a culture group before covering this chapter? And then what is one practice that you would change within that culture? Thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope I explained and summarized this chapter well enough.